there's some reporting by Politico about the Chinese providing some drones, I think, and some ballistic armor. Lots of material, but I'm wondering whether to the Russians, as you guys have been warning against it, but I guess you've seen that. Does that amount to what you've been warning them not to do?
A few things about that. Number one, we have focused our sanctions on lethal assistance. We do continue to monitor whether there are additional sanctions that we ought to impose, as well as whether there are companies that are violating our sanctions. I'm not going to comment with respect to the specific report in Politico, because the only information I have is what's contained in the article, which isn't to say I doubt it, but we would obviously have to conduct our own assessment before making any kind of determination about whether an activity was a sanctions violation or whether we needed to impose additional sanctions in response to some activity that we've seen. I will say one of the things that we made clear, that Secretary Blinken made clear to Chinese government officials when we were in Beijing, was that one, we were monitoring the issue closely and would very much oppose any action on the government side, the Chinese government transferring lethal assistance to Russia, and that number two, on the private sector side, it was an issue where we also had serious concerns. We had seen companies providing assistance to Russia in the past and had sanctioned those companies, and that we would continue to monitor it closely and take actions against private Chinese companies when we saw such sanctionable activity.
And from the government perspective, it's still the case that you haven't seen anything that sort of oversteps that line.
That's correct. That's correct.
I wanted to ask about reporting that the United States is weighing a possible deal with China on fentanyl, that the administration is considering lifting sanctions on a police forensics institute around human rights abuses in exchange for Beijing's cooperation combating the fentanyl crisis. I was wondering if you could speak to that and what the administration, if not this, what else they're doing on fentanyl.
We have not had any such discussions with Beijing. In fact, we have made quite clear to the Chinese government that we do not believe that the sanctions are in place prevent the defense minister from meeting with our Secretary of Defense, and we have made it clear that we think it is irresponsible to continue to not conduct military-to-military cooperation. It's a position that not just the State Department has made clear, but of course the Defense Department and the White House have made clear as well. On fentanyl, the Secretary made clear both in his trip to Beijing and in his recent meeting with Wang Yi that we should establish a working group. Chinese officials did give us some positive signals that they would move in that direction. It's yet to be finalized, but we do believe we should formalize a working group between our two countries to work on stopping the flow of precursor chemicals from China to Mexico, where they're then turned into fentanyl that has killed millions and millions of Americans and continues to kill Americans to this day.
Just to clarify, the lifting of human rights abuses related sanctions related to fentanyl cooperation, that's not something that's been on the table.
It's not something we've discussed with the Chinese government, no.
You said that UN take care of these issues, North Korea's missile violations. But UN doesn't do anything since from a long time. They just give up because of China and Russia have the veto, use veto actions. So how did you expect the UN Security Council take care of, these issues?
You were right about the makeup of the UN Security Council. All I will say is that we will continue to work with our partners in the region, as we have with South Korea and Japan. We will continue to urge the DPRK to refrain from escalatory action. We would certainly welcome China participating as a positive force in this regard. We've not seen that for some time. We would welcome a change of heart on their mind, and in the meantime, we will continue to make our policy clear and urge the DPRK to refrain from escalatory actions.